Welcome back, everybody. It's the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast brought to you by Reality Sports Online. I am your host, Scott Bogman. Follow me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. I'm joined, as always, by Pat Fitzmaurice at Fitz_FF. Fitzy, how we doing today, man?
Doing great, Boggs. Summer is underway. My kids are around the house. That's kind of annoying, but other than that, everything's good, man.
Got to deal with the kids. They're out of school and they're ready to go. So today we're going to be talking about doing a deep dive on running backs. We did QBs and tight ends last week, and to do that, we have Jordan McNamara from Football Guys, the host of the Analytics of Dynasty podcast. You can check out the Analytics of Dynasty 2022 edition at analyticsofdynasty.com/shop. Jordan, what is going on, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Welcome, Pat. We got to get you on a bike. That way you can get some time away from your kids. You got to get that clear mental space. It'll help you with your rankings. I swear, it's the best, man. We'll get you set up. We'll get it. We'll talk about this after the show.
Gonna get his exercise on. Yeah, we talked a little bit before the show, and I just made it. I made it known this is not for me. So I get my exercise other ways, but it's not biking. I can't do it. But look, before we dive in on these running backs, I got a couple things to tell you guys about. If you, we have a giveaway right now for a DeAndre Swift autographed jersey. We're doing right now. All you need to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros. Take a screenshot, submit it to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. That's fantasypros.com/dynasty contest, and you are entered in to win. Do this as soon as possible because this will end at the end of the month of June. So get in and get a chance to win a DeAndre Swift autographed jersey today. Also, while you're there, check out our Discord. Our Discord is free to enter, but premium Fantasy Pros subscribers get a whole bunch of other perks, like dozens of extra channels, regularly scheduled AMAs, and interactive voice chats with our analysts. Want to talk whenever you want with our Fantasy Pros analysts, just check out our Discord at fantasypros.com/chat. Again, that's fantasypros.com/chat. I'll be doing Monday stages at 8 Eastern every single day moving forward. I did one of those yesterday as we're recording this. It's so much fun. It's like a lot of dynasty trades, a lot of drafts, a lot of first-year starters. And, I do a lot of IDP stuff too, so I'll get the occasional IDP question that makes Pat cringe. But let's dive in here on these running backs, gentlemen. And how we're going to do this is I was looking at the Fantasy Pros ECR tiers. And so I'm just going to go through. There's a tier from 45 to 59. I'm not going to list off all the names, but Fitzy, let's start with you. Who in this range do you like in this tier of 45 to 59, ranked from Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking?
Yeah, so and just to set the stage for this, Bogman, I mean, like in redraft, we always have guys in this lower range out of the top 50, sometimes even out of the top 100, who come out of nowhere and all of a sudden they emerge as their team's featured back. And, there's a waiver wire frenzy.
Elijah Mitchell was the guy last year.
Yeah, people literally going all in on their fab money to get someone like that. In Dynasty, it's a little trickier because with the bigger rosters, you kind of have to ID these guys beforehand and figure out what the odds are and maybe who could be the one to come out of the ether and be really valuable. So not too many of these guys floating around the waiver wire necessarily. So I guess in this first tier from like 45 to 59 or 60 or so, it's mostly rookies. Guys like Zamir White, Tyler Allgeier, Dameon Pierce. I think we've talked about this, Boggs, when we were in our run up to the NFL draft, how much we were intrigued by Dameon Pierce and, the way he was just grossly underutilized by Dan Mullen at Florida. And now he goes right to this team that could potentially use him in workhorse duty. So that's going to be really interesting. He does have kind of an intriguing 3-down skill set. Zamir White, maybe not so much for this year, but with the Raiders opting not to pick up the 5th-year option for Josh Jacobs, we could see Jacobs walk next year and Zamir White be their primary early down back. And I kind of want to talk to you guys and get your philosophy on someone like Tyler Allgeier, who maybe is not a top-tier prospect, but goes to a place where there is a wide open runway for usage in Atlanta. Atlanta's talked about wanting to move Cordell Patterson back to maybe more of a wide receiver role, less of a pure running back role. They've got Darrel Williams there. They've got some other pretty gross.
Quadri Allison,
yeah,
Nichols.
Yeah, guys who've already had their
They're
chances.
moving Avery Williams from corner to running back this year. It's getting weird in that room for sure.
Yeah, so Allgeier, I mean, definitely has an opening if he can slide in. And I'm just curious what you guys think about that with guys who aren't necessarily, maybe you've got reservations about the talent, but the opportunity is sort of there for them. Are you a little cautious about making that leap without being certain of the, whether this is an NFL caliber talent, or are you embracing the uncertainty of this situation and thinking you could get a discount on a potential feature back?
It's a familiar spot because it seems like Atlanta the last couple of years, Jordan, has been the spot where people are just looking for anyone to take over. And we weren't looking for Cordell Patterson to do it last year, and he did it. So do you think Tyler Allgeier is potentially the guy in Atlanta this year?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually picked Cordell Patterson in this tier. And so that's and you look at day 3 running backs, historically it's a really slow start. You don't expect, if you look at like round 4, round 5 guys, it's less than a 5% chance they produce a top 24 seasonal finish in year 1. And I started looking at kind of some of the rookies in this class and thinking, okay, especially the day 3 guys, your Dameon Pierce's, your Tyler Allgeier's. Well, okay, if it's not this year, right, the odds of that happening are somewhat low. How do they skate through next year unscathed? With the free agent class, you mentioned Jacobs. You have a litany of other guys. Barkley's going to be a free agent. He's looming. Right? You have a bunch of other guys, plus a really good draft class. And all of a sudden, right, David Montgomery's a free agent. Miles Sanders is a free agent. Right? You have a whole bunch of guys who are free agents. And then on top of what projects to be a really good draft class next year. So those developmental day 3 guys, for me, in prior years, I would have been on them. But I think the landscape's particularly difficult for them right now. And you put in, for me, Patterson, last year I found the stat really interesting. He was expected for 12.9 points per game. That would have been running back 22. Javonte Williams was expected for 12.7 points per game, was expected for running back 24. And when you look at them, they're vastly different in terms of expectation now, all the way up at running back 3 in recent drafts for Javonte Williams. And we're seeing right now where Patterson is outside the top 40 in this exercise. And you just look at Patterson last year, he scored 19.2 points per game in the first 9 weeks before he was injured. And that was a lot of the receiving centric stuff. So oddly, they went away from him as a pass catcher at the end of the season and went towards him as a runner, which never made a ton of sense to me. But I don't know if it was injury related or what. But if they're going to get back to that early season type of role, there's a lot there. That was a top 8 running back to start the season last year. So he's one for me that I like that. And other guys in the range, I'm taking day 2 running backs sort of in this range. Their odds of being superseded, their odds of success, their odds of hitting are higher than your day 3 running backs by, a good percentage there. So that would be sort of my pivot on in this range.
I like the call out of Patterson for sure, because I feel like people are he wasn't much before last year. And I feel like a lot of people think he's going to go right back into that. Well, they're going to use him more as a wide receiver. They're going to take that running back stuff away from him. I mean, why would they do that though? There's, Damian Williams is fine. Tyler Allgeier could be the guy. That's why Pat and I both have him, in this range here.
Right.
And I like Dameon Pierce too. I think that's another chance for a guy to get that job. We're always looking for that Elijah Mitchell, that James Robinson, that Phillip Lindsay, that guy that's way, way lower or completely undrafted, but they go to a situation where they could earn that job. But Cordell Patterson has the job, and I feel like he offers a very high floor because, you have guys, it's Drake London is the number 1 wide out there, and he's a rookie, and there's a rookie learning curve for every rookie that has ever come in the NFL. I'm not saying he's not going to come out in and be amazing, because I think a lot of people, including me, we expect that. But Patterson is your number 1 there. There's no Calvin Ridley. Kyle Pitts is a tight end. So he's your number 1 wide receiver, and he might be your best option at running back as displayed last year. But if they are going to go to that wide receiver, I think that why not take a shot on a guy like Allgeier, right, Pat? That's just the way it is. If Patterson's going to play more wide out, we've seen what Damian Williams has to offer. We've seen what Quadri Allison has to offer. and it's not much. And that is the appeal of an Allgeier. That's the appeal of a Damian Pierce versus Marlon Mack and Rex Burkhead, right? That's why we like these guys, because it's the what's behind door number 2. We haven't seen it. We've seen what these other guys have, and it's fairly mediocre, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the story for 2022, but Jordan makes a really good point about sometimes maybe the focus is a little too narrow, and maybe we should look, pan out a little bit and look at what 2023 could look like, because there is going to be a really exciting draft class coming in. There is going to be some talent available in free agency. So that is a good point. And do these day 3 guys, these day 3 picks, Allgeier, Zamir White, Pierce, do they have the talent to withstand the, infusion of, additional talent at the position? So Patterson's an interesting one, though, because, this dude's like, I think this is going to be his age 30 or 31 season. but like, and normally you're just, that stamps a skull and crossbones on him as far as a running back.
Not a lot of wear on Patterson, though.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, he is like a 69 Mustang that's been kept like under a blanket in a barn somewhere and very lightly used, more or less
He was found on American Pickers, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Cryogenically frozen, basically just returning kickoffs earlier in his career. So, I mean, who knows how much, what kind of longevity the dude could have, since there is no odometer for him, really. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, what role they have in mind for Patterson, but they are going to have some sort of a role. So Jordan makes a good point about him continuing to stay relevant.
I just looked it up while you were talking, Pat. You compare him to 320 carries, 268 receptions in his career. You compare that to Saquon Barkley, 659 in terms of rushes, and you look at 190 in terms of receptions. So he is already sort of taken less of that beating than Barkley has through 4 years of his career, and some of that's been injury shortened. So I am with you on the fact that he's older. That's why you're getting a discount in this range. That you're not expecting multiple years of production. But any of the guys in this range, if you get 4 games of starter production, that's 15 plus points per game, they're paying it off, and we've seen that, right? So that's really what I think your aim should be, and I like that bi-modality, right? I want them to either be worth nothing or be in my lineup smashing success. That'll be a theme, I think, throughout this entire exercise.
That's the definition of a dart throw too, is you throw a dart to see, like, yes, there are good free agents in a solid draft class, and if anyone, y'all out there think I'm annoying now, wait till I start gushing about Bijan Robinson next year. It's going to be gross. So, that's the thing is, if Tyler Allgeier is successful for Atlanta, they don't have to go draft a running back. They don't have to go spend money on it for the next 2 or 3 seasons, because they have him if he earns this role. That's why we like the young guys in this range. One guy I want to ask you before we go to the next group here, Jordan, in particular, is I'm high on Brian Robinson. I know that Washington has Antonio Gibson, but I think the whole point in drafting a guy like Brian Robinson is to, number one, make it fresh legs for Gibson, because he got hurt. I think he played 11 games last season. So he's been banged up a little bit. You can move Gibson around in the offense. You can put both those backs back there like they've done before. Gibson played way more wide receiver in college than he did running back too. So you could possibly put him in the slot, put him in 4 or 5 wide sets. So what do you think about Brian Robinson, maybe having a nice role here to start in Washington? Because even Ron Rivera said, he compared these two to D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart.
Yeah, the coach speak there on comparing anyone to Jonathan Stewart is much, right, in terms of what he actually offered as a physical profile. But I appreciate the sentiment on Coach Rivera there. I mean, Robinson's the guy that he's tied for the most shares that I have of all of my players across Dynasty rookie drafts, specifically rookies. I'm a big fan of, I like profiles at costs, right? That's really it. So what, for me, you take day 2 running backs, you take round 3 running backs. If you get them into the late second, into the 3rd round of a rookie draft, that's a great success. One of the things, and again, I just keep doing that, right? So it's been years past, it's this year, right? This year was very exploitable if you were just sort of willing to do that. I actually think this class, everyone was upset about this class for a while because a lot of the stuff that makes the highlights in fantasy football, especially in Dynasty, high drafted quarterbacks and high drafted running backs weren't in this class, so people were concerned about it. But if you were to say, all right, let's look at the second round of this draft, it's actually really it's a very fertile ground for fantasy roster building. And so that, particularly with Robinson, he's floated into the third round of rookie drafts. Like, that is an auto smash thing. Same with someone that we'll probably talk about in the next year, Ty Davis Price, right? The same thing with him. You get that day 2 pedigree in the third round of rookie drafts, that becomes an automatic smash situation. And you're just hoping to keep adding to those. And listen, I take this like, what did Washington do? Right? We all have optimism about Antonio Gibson. What did they do this year? Well, they thought J.D. McKissic was going to get away. They went back and basically he was gone.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, he was a bill. He just couldn't sign yet. They lure him back. And then what else did they do? And I thought this was really telling. And it's probably telling of something that we don't have access to, which is they met with everybody. Right.
Yeah.
They met with
the Giants did that too. Yeah.
Right. They met with everyone. They met with all the running backs sort of up and down. Anyone you would expect on the first 2 days of the draft, Hall, Walker, Robinson, who they ended up taking. They met with everybody. And that should set, that was one of those things was that you looked at the pre-draft trackers. Wait a second, what's going on here? And that was something that really concerned me. So I don't know if they know more about Gibson than we know, or they have concerns about Gibson that we're just not privy to. But I think that there's that aspect of Brian Robinson, that there's a lot of information to suggest that there's concerns about Gibson in some way, shape, or form that we're not privy to. Exactly what they are, but there's something isn't totally great there. So that's sort of I think that he can really outproduce his valuation because he can do pretty much everything too.
Pat, I gotta tell you, Jordan's my new best friend. I have a hunch. He says not only is my hunch right, but provides all kinds of reasons why and numbers. So loving Jordan here so far. Let's go to the next tier, Pat. And this tier is I would say it's guys that have done it before. It's guys like Kenyon Drake, Deontay Foreman, Mostert, Marlon Mack. Gaskin is in here. Boston Scott has put some things together, or guys that had like high volume in college. Keyshawn Vaughn is in this group. Haskins is a rookie in this group. Kyron Williams, who unfortunately just broke his foot. Zach Moss, and then mixed in a couple of role players. Samaje Perine is in here. Benjamin is a straight backup. James White is a passing down guy. Chris Evans is a, probably third or fourth guy on that in that running back room now. So this tier is a little less exciting, but I still see a couple names in here that I like versus ECR. So who is it in this group that you like, Fitz?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have any, and maybe we can kick around Keyshawn Vaughn a little later. I don't know that I really have much hope for him anymore. I feel like he's had his opportunity and that door is kind of slammed. But, like in terms of immediate help, Donta Foreman being behind Christian McCaffrey now, it seemed like they were less than enamored with Chuba Hubbard in his rookie year. So maybe Deonta is that main backup now, and obviously being the backup to a guy who hasn't played more than 7 games in either of the last 2 years. That's kind of making Deonta like a valuable looking property for 2021. Obviously there's no more room at the end for Jarrett Patterson. I don't know what you guys think about him, but like I thought he looked pretty good last year in the preseason, and maybe he can land somewhere. And I mean, we're talking about a deep, in a team with 12, or a league with 12 teams, 30-man dynasty rosters. Like maybe Jarrett Patterson can get that 30th spot on someone's roster, but I don't know. It just seems like there's no plan to use him at all in Washington anymore. I'm still like kind of an Benjamin truther. I'd love to see the dude just get his shot. Really, liked him when he was with the Sun Devils, and kind of surprised he hasn't gotten it. Now people think Keontae Ingram is going to be like maybe the main backup, but I just want to like see Benjamin.
That's going to be an interesting camp battle.
Yeah,
I think, because I think, in terms of college production, pretty similar guys that, Keontae Ingram was the guy at Texas before Bijan came in. And then Bijan came in and pushed him out, and he ends up at USC, and he was very good there. Same thing for Benjamin. Benjamin was the guy at ASU. It was before Jaden Daniels, before they had much. So I think that's going to be a pretty good job to back up an injury-prone running back in James Conner. So I like where your head's at in terms of there.
Yeah, and Dearness Johnson, I think if he can get himself out of that Cleveland logjam, that he could be really interesting. And Chris Evans, I don't know if they're going to keep him behind Samaje Perine as the backup to Mixon, but I'm intrigued by his athleticism and, at least in theory, run catch versatility. A guy who was kind of maybe not as prolific in college, sort of had the Harbaugh handicap. Harbaugh seemed to find a way to make some incredible athletes less productive in college than you thought they should be. And I think Evans fell into that category. So I still wonder if he might pop at some point. Kind of a guy I don't mind stashing on my roster if I can.
The Harbaugh handicap is why I am a little enamored in Haskins, because Haskins was kind of the first running back of the Jim Harbaugh era to kind of buck that and get the majority. I mean, Blake Corum will still use, of course, and he's going to be there this year as well. And this is just something I know from playing a lot of college fantasy football as well, is that I never take a Harbaugh back because he uses 100 of them. It's like 14 guys will get a carry in a game, including 3 different quarterbacks. So it's always annoying that he does. But Haskins is a guy that bucked that. Situation is terrible for him. So that kind of leads me to a bigger point here, Jordan. In this range, when, and we're talking about RB 60 through 79 in this group. So we're getting late, even for dynasty leagues, that this is getting fairly late. Not the biggest. I play in a lot of 16-man that are way later than this, but are you drafting more situation or traits? Obviously you want those together. I think TDP is an easy pick in this range because he could, Tyrion Davis-Price could end up leading the Niners. Elijah Mitchell shouldn't be a lead back. He should be a second back. So are you drafting more traits or more situation in this range?
That's a great question. I think there's basically 2 approaches that you would go. If I can get in this range someone that has a rookie that has day 2 pedigree, like Ty Davis-Price does, that is a smash type situation, because everyone else in this range really doesn't have that, or there's other things going on. You have a Kenyon Drake, and he's sort of further on in his career and the like. And a lot of the other guys in this range are backups in some way, shape, or form, whether that's a full committee or a partial committee or what have you, right? So Ty Davis-Price is the guy in this range that sticks out from that perspective. The other thing in this range that I would do, and I think as you go further down Dynasty in particular, I think the mistake that a lot of Dynasty people make is they play for the long term further down the board. Right, they play a really long-term game, 15 through 25 spots on the roster. Those roster spots should be churning, right? They should be quickly moving through. And so you shouldn't be taking a backup spot on a guy like Darrel Patterson, hoping that, hey, maybe Antonio Gibson walks and in a couple of years he sort of inherits. That's the wrong way to use that roster spot. The better way to use it is to take a shot on a guy like you guys said. It's more of a volume game, I think, really, than it necessarily is it has to be a specific one, right? So kind of taking a lot of those shots would be the thing that I would say. So some of my favorite ones in this range, really, I like Perine a lot. I think Chris Evans, when you look at his stats last year, Chris Evans didn't run a ton of routes. So you got to small sample size caveats abound, only 65 routes, but 2.32 yards per route run is an enormous number for a rookie running back. So again, it's a small sample, but very productive on a very small sample. So that's something I would look at and have a little bit of optimism about. Dearness Johnson with the new contract, I find interesting as well. And Haskins, I have a bunch of, again, that's later in the 3rd round after Ty Davis-Price and rookie drafts. But really the guy for me on top of all those guys Darrel Williams signing with Arizona is interesting, and I think you guys talked about Eno and the competition there. For me, Darrel Williams, we just saw what he can do in Kansas City. He's a lot of a poor man's James Conner.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
And I mean, they wouldn't say it directly, but they said, Kingsbury asked, players in Kansas City. It's like, well, come on, he asked Patrick Mahomes, Texas Tech connection there. So he asked Patrick Mahomes about him, and Mahomes vouched for Darrel Williams, and it's always great to hear, one of the best players in the league vouch for you.
Right. Well, and I guess we do have to be careful, though, because he vouched for Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Jonathan Taylor. So let's be careful on the Patrick Mahomes running back endorsements. But I mean, Darrel Williams in games where he started last year and it wasn't Clyde Edwards-Helaire, really, and he started the last game of the season when he didn't really play, and those other 5 games that he played, more than 17 points per game. So you're looking at big-time difference makers, right? That's what you're shooting for in this range. Handful of spot starts is a really good shot in the arm in your lineup. Guys like that. And again, the most important lesson in this range, make your bet. And then if your guy's cut, if you make a bet on Eno Benjamin and he's cut him, move on, make the next bet and just keep churning that roster spot. That roster spot should signify to you, especially as we go down this exercise, it should signify to you, hey, here's a bet that I'm making on a backup spot. And I'll just keep recycling the bet as we go along. It's more about taking a volume shot at that than it really is a specific person at this particular cost.
Yeah, I love that. That's a perfect answer as well. Before we move on here, I got to tell you guys about Reality Sports Online. By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, this powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like any NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It is not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. That is it. Think you are among the fantasy elite? Well, this is a platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test your general manager skills for free, FREE, in a mock free agency auction right now. If you like what you see, use the promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. Pat, is there anyone else in this range? I like, it's for me, of course, I'm going to homer out and say Deontay Foreman. I'm a Texas fan. I've seen this guy carry the load, but I wasn't sure after he tore his Achilles, I just wasn't sure about him. Seeing him come back last year and perform so well for Tennessee, I think he's a great backup option in Carolina. I think he's a guy that can carry the load. He's a hammer. He's not really going to be elusive. He's not going to make a bunch of tacklers miss. He's going to run them over. So he's basic, but he's a guy that can do it. He has a giant frame, so I enjoy watching him. And the rookies that I like here, it's Tyrion Davis-Price, just because San Francisco is a team that uses multiple backs constantly. This is the Shanahan, LaFleur type of deal, so we're going to see a lot of mixing and matching. So, Mitchell should be at the front. He proved himself last year, also proved he can't stay healthy for a full season. So TDP is going to come into this mix with Trey Sermon as well. Seems like they're kind of done with Trey Sermon, but the guy's still on the roster for a little bit. And then Pierre Strong, just as someone's got to make explosive plays in New England. So these are the guys that I like in this range. I think, Strong being more of a dart throw than the other two, but is there anyone else in this range? Or you want to go down to the next tier?
What do you guys think of Raheem Mostert and Kenyon Drake, Marlon Mack, guys who could have roles, obviously don't have much of a long-term future? Mostert's kind of an interesting one. I mean, the guy's always been productive these last few years whenever he's been healthy, but that's been a pretty small window here. And, Marlon Mack, I mean, if there's veteran deference with the Texans, he could very well be their starting running back come week 1. If they are reluctant to turn things over to Dameon Pierce, if they do decide that they're going to have him play on special teams early in his career, which I've heard rumors about. So I don't know. What do you guys think of these guys in this less attractive age range?
Those are the guys that Jordan was just talking about. These are the guys that you should be, potentially taking a shot on, because if they win the job, great. Now you have volume play But if they don't, then cut him and pick up a grab and stash guy, right, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mostert's really interesting with Miami. He hasn't been able to stay healthy, but the Miami offensive staff is from the 49ers and brings Mostert with him. I think that story is always interesting. Drake is similarly, right? I like where we've seen guys do it and are an injury away, right? Because at least we know that they're capable of it. Marlon Mack, I'm not sure. That situation could be clouded. It could be a three-headed monster and be tough to sort of extract, or he could really step forward. We'll see there. That's one, I think, one of the handful of ones you're really going to watch here over the offseason. But I do like this range, and it's interesting. People will generally say, oh, you got to go early at running back, or you're drafting in the dead zone or whatnot. Like, I'll go into this range. And I think the beauty of even in this range with taking multiple of these guys, it's June. You don't have to have the right answer to your lineup question in November and June, right? What you want is lots of options along the way. And this range and further, right? Cultivating this range of your roster will give you that opportunity as you go along. So that's one thing I just constantly be churning that part of your roster, and don't think of, hey, this person's got to fill week 1 for me, right? You're shooting to get a lot of options throughout the season, and this range is one that can give it to you.
Moving down to the next tier here, it's 80 to 100. So it's 20 backs, and we're talking, deeper throws than before. I mean, Pat's guy, Kenny Nwoku, is in here. My guy, Ty Chandler, is in here. So we like the 3rd and 4th running backs from Minnesota. Jamar Jefferson, I like, but he's buried in Detroit. Philip Lindsay's a guy that we've seen do it before. Rex Burkhead is a guy that we've seen do it before. Mark Ingram is 1,000, and he's in this range. He's like my age. That's not good for a running back. Jerick McKinnon had a couple good games last year. The aforementioned Keontae Ingram, Jeff Wilson Jr., JaMychal Hasty, Larry Roundtree. So guys that have, high ceilings, but the floor keeps dropping lower and lower the further down we get here. So, Fitz, who is it from this range that you would like to take a shot on?
Boy, it seems like it's all NFC North guys, Bogman. It's Kenny Nwoku.
The grinding guys. That's what it is right here.
Yeah, you mentioned my Kenny Nwoku crush, and maybe that gets sort of a wet blanket with Ty Chandler coming in. We're going to have to bet like a steak dinner on who comes out of that as the number 3 running back in Minnesota. But Nwoku just looked like he was shot out of a cannon whenever he got the ball last year in limited touches, kick return duty. He just has like that it factor, it seems like, when he has the ball. So I'm kind of like, that's a guy I'm willing to stash. And I know, and man, Jordan is like the perfect guest for this show, because he's giving us like the ABCs of playing the sleeper running backs, and the ABCs in this case means always be churning. Like that's, and I do
First
agree
place
with
you
that.
Fired. Yeah.
But yeah, man, Nwoku is just a guy, like, I don't mind maybe stashing a guy like that. Just a guy we know he's bottled up and blocked probably for this year. And then maybe something could become of him after that. So we'll see him.
A little too low on him too, Pat. Like, because my thought was like, well, he wasn't the starter for his own team, but the starter for his team was Breece Hall. Right. So it's kind of hard to knock him for having one of the best running backs in the country ahead of him. So I'm probably a little too low on him, but I also I was high on Ty Chandler coming in. So, that's just where I am now. So I don't mean to be the wet blanket every time I see him. I know I am.
So I'll throw out 2 other NFC North guys. One is Kylin Hill, who really impressed the Packers in the preseason last year and was, had the number 3 running back gig for Green Bay, which could potentially be really, really valuable if anything happened to Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon. But Kylin Hill tore his ACL taking a kickoff from like 7 or 8 yards deep in the end zone, which is never a good idea to begin with. And, kind of a severe thing that obviously ended his season. And I don't know if he's going to be ready for the start of the year, but if he is, he has got the inside track on that potentially valuable number 3 running back role for the Packers. And as we've talked about, Boggs, it would not surprise me if the Packers led the NFL in like fantasy points from the running back position this year.
Yeah.
I mean, with the state of their wide receiver core, with what they've added to their defense, and like, you know, having, I think, the third highest projected win total in the NFL this year, they're going to have a lot of run-friendly game scripts. So like getting a sneaky piece in Kylin Hill, a guy who could potentially have a role if we saw injuries, is kind of appealing to me. And then like Darrynton Evans, we kept waiting for him to like be the primary backup to Derrick Henry. He kept getting hurt. It just didn't happen. Now he's in Chicago, and Chicago is in full on tank mode. Like they have no incentive not to use like every piece of their roster. Like, you know, use the entire Buffalo, cut it all up, get it on the fire. I mean, see what you've got in this guy, because they're going to just stink out loud this year. And, you know, there's no incentive, even though we know that David Montgomery is capable of being a workhorse. Like there's really no reason for them not to give Khalil Herbert and Darrynton Evans work this year.
I like the Cheshire grin that Pat gets whenever he talks about the Bears tanking. So you get a little extra smiley when you talk about the Bears potentially tanking and being bad, which I'm here for it. But
you know what? They know it. Like the Bears here in Chicago, they know it. They know it's going to be bad. I'm not breaking any bad news to Bears fans here. They're
You're just reveling in it a little bit, and that's fine. You know, look, the Browns and Bengals were bad for a long time, and I love every second of it. You know, now the Steelers are, you know, kind of getting their comeuppance here, it seems. But Jordan, in this range, I mean, I like the thought process there that Pat has. Kylin Hill was kind of like, in his class, was kind of the Ty Chandler to me, where I liked him, knew he was going to go late, depends on the situation. But like you said, it's a good call, because they're going to use multi-backs in Green Bay. It's a Shanahan disciple. You know, that's why we have it in New York. That's why we have it in Miami with McDonald. That's why we have it in Green Bay and San Francisco, obviously. So there's going to be multiple backs used there. But who in this range catches your eye, Jordan, in this tier?
So I agree with that. Burkhead, I think, is interesting. I think he has a shot to be the starter in Houston, and maybe he can get you a handful of starts. We'll see sort of how that situation unfolds. He's the cheapest guy in an uncertain situation and basically free. I think I got a 26th round of a startup draft that I'm in right now. I mean, I'm either going to play him, or he's going to be an injury away guy, or he's going to get cut and I'm going to cut him, right? Like it's going to be, I think his decision tree is pretty simple and straightforward there. Damian Williams, for reasons we talked about with the uncertainty in the Atlanta offense, I would echo him here as well. Mike Davis, I think, is interesting because of the impact that he has on J.K. Dobbins and the uncertainty of Gus Edwards, both of their rehabilitations. And we've seen bringing in Mike Davis, I think, is enough to say, right? You just sort of look at that situation and say, if everyone was good, you probably wouldn't need to bring in Mike Davis. And now you bring in Mike Davis.
This is a great point, Jordan, because Pat and I have talked about this, because I had Dobbins as kind of a sleeper going into the draft, because my thought process was, well, Dobbins and Gus Edwards both blew out their knees last year. They got all these veterans, all that stuff, but they haven't made a move before the draft, right? They didn't make a move. They didn't go get him. And there were plenty of guys. Mostert was out there. You know, there are plenty of guys that you could have snapped up. Darrynton Evans was a good acquisition that could back up these guys and kind of do the same type of stuff. But instead of doing that, they drafted Tyler Beatty, and then they signed Mike Davis. And one of the things that Pat always mentioned when I would talk about Dobbins is that he doesn't catch the ball very much. They don't throw the ball very much to the running back. So my thought process about this, and this is why I knocked Dobbins a little bit after the draft, even though they didn't bring in anyone crazy impactful to his role, but they might be carving out a new role in Baltimore to throw the ball to the backs more, and that's why they drafted Beatty, and that's why they signed Mike Davis. Both these guys can catch the ball very, very well. So, you know, not even just the fact that these guys were both hurt last year, but also it seems like they could be looking for a certain type of back, which would, of course, take away from Dobbins and Edwards, plus Lamar is still going to run. So I'm on board with you in that thought process for sure.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Pat said about Kenny Ngannou. And I believe that I mispronounce his name every time I say it. So forgive me in advance.
Same.
So if you look, Alexander Madison's a free agent. Delvin Cook, he has a $14.1 million cap figure in 2023. He's got no guaranteed money after this year. They could save almost $8 million against the cap by cutting him next year. He is no longer on scholarship with the former front office that gave him that. And it's a more of a pro analytics or a newer age front office there. I think that there's a very real situation in which they find themselves potentially in a situation to move on, craft that cap. We'll see sort of what they do with Cousins and everything like that. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in that offense. All of that is to say that you could see a scenario that breaks right for a guy like Kenny Ngannou, and he could be, and even if it's just for a moment in time, there's a value uptick there where he could be a starter or even an injury away type. And with that physical profile, that's really compelling. So for that reason, I think, and maybe if you're in shallow leagues, right, if you're playing 20 man, something like that, it might be tough to get him crammed on a roster right now. But if you're playing 25, 30 man, something like that, even deeper, he should be there. And if you're playing in a shallower format, he should be a in-season waiver wire ad, or Ty Chandler, whoever sort of wins out that competition. I think either of those guys make a lot of sense sort of in that specific, making that specific bet.
I made that exact point about Ty Chandler a couple weeks ago. So, Jordan, I'm loving it. We're absolutely simpatico here on the ball. Going down to the next tier, unless there's anyone else, is there anybody else from this tier we want to talk about?
Oh, yeah. Are we going to just gloss over the guy who launched the airing of dirty laundry in an MLB fantasy football league? We've got to talk about Jeff Wilson, right? Getting the guy who caused Tommy Pham to slap Jock Peterson, who got Mike Trout outed as possibly the worst commissioner in America.
Yeah. Which is every fantasy commissioner, by the way. It's just like the commissioners of real sports. Your fantasy commissioner is always this guy's changing the rules. He's always the worst. So
it's got to be fantasy football making baseball the most relevant. Their most relevant story that it's fantasy football is absolutely amazing, right?
I saw, and I don't know if it's true. So I did not back this up at all. But of the 100 most watched TV programs in 2021, 92 were NFL games, is what I read yesterday. Wow. So, I mean, that is insanity. That is just crazy what a hold the NFL has on the U.S. population here. But all right, I mean, let's hear it. Let's hear about Jeff Wilson Jr. because I like Elisha Mitchell. I like Ty Davis Price. They still have Sermon. They still have Hasty on this roster too. So I'm not a big Jeff Wilson guy. But he's done it in the past, Pat. So there's opportunity there for him.
Yeah, they seem to like him there. He's versatile, and it always seemed like he was close to cashing in for people who had him on their, who had claimed him and, weren't stashing him illegally on a taxi squad. Like he had that. I remember that one game where he was like wide open for an easy TD catch, and I think it was Garoppolo who like overthrew him, just sailed it like 10 feet over his head.
The Darnell Mooney highlight clip. That thing.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wonder if they've maybe stacked up too many bodies in the 49ers running back room for Wilson to have his chance, even though they do seem to like him as this utility player for them. But
you put him in Houston and he's the back. You put him in Atlanta and he's the guy, right? So
he has a role for sure, a committee guy at worst. But now, like with Mitchell and Davis Price, who a lot of people like, and does Sermon potentially get another shot? So it's just hard to see Wilson breaking through, but had to mention him as a newsy player.
I like bringing him up just to throw him in here. You know what? Instead of tiers, we got like 15 minutes left. We have on Fantasy Pros, we've gone through. This is basically 45 to 100 here. But we have ranks all the way down to 175 running backs in our Dynasty expert consensus ranking here. I just added mine in there too. So some of these numbers are going to be moving, here. But is there anyone else lower, Fitz, that you, regardless of tier here, because there's like, I think 3 or 4 tiers left, Who else do you like that's down here and you're throwing a dart on in deep leagues?
Yeah, I mean, Boggs, you and I, like in draft season, did not talk much at all about Snoop Conner, but going to Jacksonville and where we've got Robinson recovering from
Achilles.
Yeah, so Conner could certainly work his way into a role right off the bat.
And it's not just that they took him, it's that they drafted him, and they drafted him way higher. I didn't think he was going to get drafted, number one. I thought Jerry Neely was better than him. There's a couple other UDFA backs that I like better than Snoop Conner. But, they're showing you what's happening here. Robinson is the guy, but he's coming off the injury. Travis Etienne is a question mark. Reichwell hasn't worked out. So in the way they talked about Snoop, I think they just like him. So I'm with you. I wasn't in on Snoop going in, but the way Jacksonville has talked about him makes me take a second look at least. So I understand where you're coming from with him.
And, Jordan has talked about what a bad percentage play day 3 running backs are. Well, UDFA running backs are even worse percentage plays, but I'm still a little intrigued by Kennedy Brooks because I'm really surprised he didn't get drafted. And then he goes to an Eagles team that's one of the best run blocking teams in the league. So, should he get a chance? And we did see like 4 different running backs get significant touches for the Eagles last year. So maybe there's a little bit of daylight for Brooks to be, at least mildly impactful as a rookie. And Isaih Pacheco, I mean, we had Matt Waldman on, and he sang the praises of Pacheco, who had kind of an interesting and troubled background at Rutgers, but just like his family situation and everything. But, maybe he can overcome that and make for a really good story in a terrific offense on the Chiefs. And we know that Ronald Jones has certain shortcomings in the passing game. We've seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire pretty grossly underachieve his first couple of years there. So maybe there's a chance for Pacheco. And did Ely wind up in Kansas City also? He did, didn't he? So maybe it's one of those two guys we see coming through and having a much bigger role than anticipated.
Yeah, and, sometimes it's better for these guys to not get drafted, and be able to earn a role in a better offense and pick their spot too. And, every team has the same amount of money to spend on these UDFAs. So sometimes a team will spend a little more on someone who from, 101 down to 175 and anyone that's not even on the list here. Jordan, who do you like as far as your deep RB plays for Dynasty?
Yeah, I mean, in this range, I just want, I'm hoping for a couple of starts. I'm just hoping for a couple of injury away starts. I think the closest person to that, I think there's really maybe 2 or 3 guys to that. Benny Snell, I think, could be the injury away guy in Pittsburgh. I don't know.
He's the guy.
Him or Anthony McFarland. We don't have a ton of sample to prove that, but both those guys are interesting. I've been snagging up Benny Snell, and again, if I'm wrong, I'm just cutting him and moving on. Right, that doesn't cost you anything, and that's kind of the beauty in this range if you treat him like that. Tony Jones is another one with the Saints. Had a really good preseason last year, and then he got hurt, and then they brought back Mark Ingram, who could himself see a little bit of work. We'll see there if they, what his long-term future looks like. Jones could be a guy that could potentially push Ingram for that running back 2 spot. We saw him have success and basically win that job last year before getting injured. And so those would be really the guys in this range that I'd be interested in. Again, I have to give a special shout out to Latavius Murray, who is actually the Analytics of Dynasty logo. So I have to, with the hope that maybe he can land someplace and be the injury away guy, because there's still a couple of spots that I think are good opportunities for injury away spots. The Giants in particular, I like Matt Breida as much as anyone likes Matt Breida outside of his family. That said, there can't be a ton of faith there that he's a running back 2 behind Saquon Barkley. So there are these situations that could potentially open up. A guy like Latavius Murray could potentially be candidates for that as well. So I'd be paying attention to that, to that type of circuit for the remaining free agents out there.
Yeah, and there's there's other guys here. Booker looked pretty good at the end of last season. You know, there are a couple times where I'm like, oh man, Saquon looks explosive. Oh man, that's Booker. Why does Booker look so good? You know, so that there were a couple of those flashes that came to me last season with him. You know, Benny Snell, as you mentioned, Benny Snell is the guy. They brought in a couple UDFAs and they tried to make Anthony McFarland work, but I feel like there's this secondary role that Tomlin has tried to get in Pittsburgh since he became the head coach there that just hasn't worked. Chris Rainey was one of those guys. And I just remember him talking about Chris Rainey going, will he be used in third downs on like pass blocking? And someone said, well, you're not going to, Tomlin said, you're not going to tow a boat with your Ferrari, is how he described Chris Rainey. And I was like, how is this guy ever going to get on the field then? And that's kind of what the same deal that they've done with Anthony McFarland is. It's the same thing, is that there's just not a lot of spots for him. And Najee is falling into this Christian McCaffrey type of, you know, thing where no one is even close to him on the roster. So it's so difficult to take him off the field. You want to do it. You want to give him a breather. But when the game is close, which most NFL games are for most of the game, if the game is close, you want your best player out there. So it's just hard for them to take Najee out, which could lead to injury issues like it did with James Conner. And Benny Snell is the exact, you know, direct backup to Najee. So that's a guy that I put on here too. You know, you also took Snoop. I think that one is a great one. Do you guys have any love for these guys that, you know, could turn into a James White or you know, Gio Bernard is in this role. He did that for a while in Cincinnati as well. Like Demetric Felton is there. I mean, before he popped his Achilles, Tariq Cohen was in there. Agumba Wale, I would say, is built like that. We saw Dontrell Hilliard from Tennessee come in and kind of have that type of role. Are there any of those guys that you'd like to take a risk on here, Pat? Or is it just like take your Benny Snells and your Craig Reynolds and you know, Kennedy Brooks and guys like that can take a multiple amount of carries, Fitz? Or are you interested in potential roles that could last longer, or do you just want straight backups? If they start a game, I know I can put them in and they're good.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm interested in those guys if they have stable roles as the third down backs. Guys like, you know, the Naheem Hineses and J.D. McKissick's come immediately to mind. Less interested in, you know, and I hate to badmouth Dare Agumawale, who went to the same high school and same college as me, but
man.
Yeah, so I know Dare and I are like best friends, but you know, but Dare was, even in college at Wisconsin, Dare was never like a ball carrier. He just wasn't like, that's not, so at most he's going to be a third down back, and he's never gotten like consistent work there. So kind of not interested in pursuing those guys. But you know, I do just want to say though, like, Jordan was the perfect guest for this episode.
Absolutely.
Like, he is, and like one of the things that I'm taking away from this, and I'm totally guilty, when you look at these deeper dive running backs, like, you get obsessed with youth. Like, maybe this guy will come out of the mist and he'll be this team's featured back for the next 3 years, and I'll have, you know, grabbed this guy in the 27th round of a startup or picked him off waivers or whatever. Your chances of doing that are so minuscule, and Jordan is correctly setting his sights on a more realistic goal of getting 3 or 4 starts out of these guys, and like having them be of some utility to him in season in the pursuit of a title. So I think that's just such a good perspective to have on this. And, you know, maybe kind of putting my more pie in the sky aspirations with these, the running backs in these tiers, sort of, you know, sending me down to earth a little bit with that, which I appreciate.
Look, everyone has to come down to earth, right, Jordan? But you know, taking a dart throw on some of these players and seeing if they work. I mean, just how great do you feel? Like, Philip Lindsay was my UDFA that absolutely worked out for me. That's why I highlighted him on here, because that was one where I'm like, Denver's got a decent role. This guy led Colorado in carries. Like, we've seen him do it, and they brought him in. So maybe, and it worked out. Now, I've said this about maybe 100 other guys that hasn't worked out too. And of course, you know, being an analyst, I remember those probably a little bit more, but I'm going to brag about the ones that I get right. I didn't have any shares of James Robinson, and he was the most recent guy to have that type of giant success. But I wasn't on him. But I mean, it's always fun to throw a dart on a guy that you just liked watching in college, and maybe it pans out. And sometimes it's your guess is as good as mine. We're just trying to help you narrow the guess by saying who we like. So Jordan, is there anyone else that we haven't mentioned that you just have a feeling about, or have a deep down gut feeling that maybe it's not analytical, but you just like the way that they play?
It's funny because Pat asked me, hey, he's like, you want to come on and talk about deep running backs? So I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. Like, I can't get, I'm at the Starbucks and trying to get the barista to talk to me, and she just isn't interested in that. But I will absolutely come on your show and talk. Like,
way easier to do it here with fellow nerds.
Right.
So
yes, you picked the right person. No, I mean, I think more than in the overarching thing that I would say in this range, and last year I went back and actually looked at a draft that I had done, and it was basically, I had taken, I think at the last 14 rounds, I had taken 12 running backs, right? And that's the type of shape that I like in my roster. And the order of them, by the time the season was all over, was all jacked up, right? It ended up being running, I think it was running in the 24th round, I took Darrel Williams. In the 27th round, I took Devontae Booker. And those guys, like, when you put them together, there was a stretch of about a month where that was a running back one type production, right? And again, you don't know what the answer is in June, and you might not even know in August, right? Or week 3, what's going to basically fuel you down the stretch. What you're hoping to do is sort of get that right, so that way you're taking it's a volume game, right? Because there's a high attrition rate at running back, and what you're looking is spot start here, spot start there. So to answer your question before of, are you taking guys that can get that receiving work? I don't really like to do that, because I want a clear yes or no in terms of if this person's going in the lineup. And when you do that, what you find is, like last year, there was situations where I had really good running back situations that was basically putting guys like Saquon Barkley on the outside of my lineup looking in, right? And those were just week to week start situations, right? And I wouldn't have been able to predict all that would happen along the way, other than to say the more bets that I can take on that. You're just looking for one, you're looking to, what you're trying to do in these flex spots is just basically add up to, 14 starts for one flex spot, or 28 spots for 2 flex spots throughout the season, right? It's just, you're just trying to fit players that are starting in that range. And you can do that a lot in this. You're not going to know in June who it is, but that situation will reveal itself when the time comes. And you just need to take a lot of shots on them.
One more question before we let you go here. And it's more of a, startup philosophical question. Because I got asked this a bunch on my stages yesterday. So I think it's just important to bring to the show here. Your thought of, in a dynasty, are you trying to get running backs early, or because they don't last and they get beat up and they do churn, are you trying to get more established wide receivers and take these shots later on the running backs because it can work for you? I would say it just makes drafting a little more difficult overall if you're not going RB first, because you don't feel as safe. It's probably the same difficulty level no matter who you take. But it feels safer to take those running backs. So are you, in general, in dynasty startups, are you taking running backs early, or are you leaning on those wideouts?
I'm doing a lot of super flex startups, so I'm going quarterback early. I'm in a lot of tight end premium startups, so I'm going first 4 rounds has become 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends. It's basically how I've leaned into it. Again, there's 2 PPR for tight ends in those leagues, so I've very aggressively gone towards that. And then I find in the range from basically kind of running back like 16 to 24, if you will, right in that sort of ADP range, that's lucrative. You can kind of double hit that. That'll give you a really good floor ceiling combo. Guys like Kamara can fall into there. There's a variety of guys in there. Connor, Fournette, Josh Jacobs as well, sort of in that range. And then, trying to flesh out 4 or 5 wide receivers I really feel good about. That'll allow me to take a lot of running backs. And by a lot of running backs, I want to take more running backs than wide receivers. I want to take
12. Yeah.
I want to take twice as many running backs as I have wide receivers, really, is what my goal is. Just as many as I can get, because I'm just trying to constantly churn them.
Yeah. Fitz, do you have, a preference at running back or wide receiver? Do you just really go off your board for the first couple rounds?
No, I tend to have a wide receiver heavy build in startups and attack that position a little more aggressively and, willing to wait a little bit, just get, maybe one sort of anchor back. But Jordan's right about that sweet spot, like in the 16 to 24 range. Like that's where I maybe try to sneak in and see if I can get two of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I like running backs more, but it probably just makes me feel safer. It's kind of like that Futurama clip where it's executive delivery boy. It's just a title to make him feel better. That's probably what it's like and why I take running backs early. But I always seem to like my team. Just wide receivers are cheap. There's so many good ones. You can go way down the board and feel comfortable in wide receivers. So it just makes me feel a little bit better. So I am still taking running backs early. But there's any way you cut it, there's a good answer. And you can do any strategy and be successful for sure. But that is going to wrap it up for us. We want to thank Jordan for joining us. Remember, find him on the Twitter at McNamara Dynasty and Analytics of Dynasty podcast and the 2022 edition, analyticsofdynasty.com/shop. So Jordan, what do you have coming up? What is there a certain day you do the podcast and what else is coming up for you over at Football Guys?
Yeah, analyticsofdynasty.com releases a podcast every day. We did 388 podcasts last year. So all of that content there for you. And we got the Football Guys podcast as well, which I'm recording tonight with my co-host Chad Parsons. You can check all that out. But yeah, go ahead and check out analyticsofdynasty.com. Get subscribe. Use the promo code June. It'll get you 10% off a yearly membership.
Awesome. Fitzy at Fitz_FF. What's coming up for you, my friend?
Clearly not enough if Jordan is putting out all those podcasts. Like we're slacking here with our one a week. So we're going to have to, talk to management about maybe going, a few more shows a week. But no, we're just continuing to work on our redraft kit, which should be out. Will definitely be out later this month, maybe even mid-month. So that's been pretty all-encompassing.
I'm finishing up my articles, my IDP stuff for that coming out later for Fantasy Pros this month. And you can find me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. And, all the football stuff I do is full peak right now. I'm doing this show. I'll be doing my show with the Welsh over at ITL. I do CFP Winning Edge with Nick Allen talking about college football. I do college fantasy football with John Lobb, whose father just passed away. So send our thoughts out to our buddy John Lobb at Gridiron Skull 91 on the Twitter. Just a great human being. I do that with him and Eric Froton. So lots of football. I don't do it 5 days a week like Jordan, but I do. I'm probably one of the few people that podcast more than Jordan. So you can find me all over the place. But that is going to wrap it up for us. Wide receivers coming next week, so stick with us. We will see you guys next time. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.